All right, we'll get started. My name is Paul Ferrillo. I'm from a major law firm here in New York City. And you probably have a number of questions, why is a lawyer here, rather than somebody from the cybersecurity community. Well, I am ex officio cybersecurity. I stood up the Master's in Cybersecurity program at Boston College. I teach cybersecurity at Harvard Law School. I teach a number of courses around the country and work heavily in the area, both with private sector clients and with the government as well too. Why is a lawyer effective in a presentation like this? Well, I tend to think I'm perhaps more effective in a presentation like this because I'm not burdened with the past. I'm not burdened with a way that you've done things for the last 10 or 15 years. I'm not burdened with old infrastructure, firewalls, and things that we once thought were effective but are probably not really effective anymore. I'm burdened with the facts, and I use the facts to demonstrate sort of a method which I think is probably the method that needs to be preferred, at least in critical infrastructure, and if not more. You can stop me at any time, ask questions at any time. Where did I get all this material? It's mine. Do I work with vendors? Yes, I do, as we construct and we try to put together, as Ron Ross just said, better architecture, and by better architecture, better security as well too. I'm here for lots of different reasons. I'm here because if you've seen me on LinkedIn, I am Director Fury of the Cyber Avengers. I have a group of individuals and guys who work with me who talk about best practices here in the United States as well too. I'm a big believer in this country and its infrastructure, and a big believer that we're getting our clock cleaned every day as far as our data security is concerned. And I'm a big believer in the future being very grim if we don't pay attention to what we are doing. So my presentation today is on how the intersection of deep learning, meeting cybersecurity, meeting critical infrastructure. And before I start, I want to make sure we all understand and are on the same page. I'm not just talking about the electric grid. I'm not just talking about power plants and pipelines. Critical infrastructure is a much broader topic, which includes something like financial institutions as well too. And there are many here today. We know what our problems are here in the United States. 100,000 malware variants created every hour. We have bad actors who have embraced deep learning, artificial intelligence, machine learning in order to find vulnerabilities in our software, vulnerabilities in our systems. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we have a preset notion of what we think works in cybersecurity. What we think works, meaning defend the perimeter or else. We know that doesn't work. We know we can't hire enough people to have that work. And I think we know instinctively something's wrong when every week we have Equifax, we have Deloitte, we have the SEC, and we have some major breach where we have critical data that is stolen from us. Again, focusing on critical infrastructure, you know, these are a little different facts than you're used to. You can see year by year the increase in reported cybersecurity incidents against U.S. critical infrastructure, from a low of 198 in 2012 to a high of 295 in 2015. And I add to say that these are reported incidents, and we do not know about what is not reported. I believe this number to be far greater than 295. That's my own circumspect, but since I don't believe in much, I think that we need to think about this as a big problem first so we can find a solution. Here's another interesting chart When we're talking about incidents per critical infrastructure sector, we see manufacturing and energy leading the charge here, coupled with water, transportation, and government facilities. Have to add healthcare in as well too. I try not to pick on healthcare. We have a number of big healthcare clients, and therefore I don't want to get my ass fired by somebody. So I leave that well enough alone, but you can see the manufacturing sector alone being a very impacted sector for cybersecurity incidents, and we can talk to a blue in the face about WannaCry and Petya and how those affected the manufacturing sector. Sure.
Why do you think the manufacturing sector is partial to that?
The manufacturing sector, like I said, unlike myself, is blessed with, well, I have gray hair, but the manufacturing sector is blessed with aging infrastructure. The manufacturing sector, as we know, is designed to build a product. It's not designed to provide cybersecurity for people. The manufacturing sector, I hate to be cynical, is designed to make profits, and cybersecurity is generally not thought to be a profit-making endeavor. It means to be a profit-absorbing endeavor. Now that's backward-assed. I know when I'm saying that, where cybersecurity could be a positive benefit to the community and a positive benefit to the manufacturing sector, but I think not. And I think this is sort of the problem that we're facing here in the United States when we're talking about critical infrastructure. Part of it is the government problem that we see just spread out across the private sector. Aging infrastructure, using floppy disk drives, and using things that were built before your kids were built, you know, constructed. I mean conceived, sorry. We have a continued problem, and I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about some of these incidents. I'm not sure if you have them at your fingertips, but I thought it critically important to sort of think about what we have seen in critical infrastructure and the types of incidents we've seen. Stuxnet, you may remember to be an alleged device created by the United States and Israel to what?
Iran centrifuges.
To adversely affect Iran centrifuges. We know, or at least we think we know, it was spread by USB devices in which contained zero-day exploits which were sent to the companies involved. Now, if you read the facts of Stuxnet, you'll also see they were sent to vendors that did business with these uranium facilities, which is an interesting take on the whole trusted third-party vendor problem that we have here in the United States as well too, and how are we thinking about that? Saudi Aramco, I know all the people involved in cleaning up Saudi Aramco. Wiperware attack, which was commenced by insiders with privileged access. Again, this was a virus that was spread by USB devices. The only saving grace for Saudi Aramco is that their IT and OT networks were segmented, and therefore, though it wiped out 35,000 personal computers on the IT network, it did not affect the oil production capabilities of Saudi Aramco. Belgacom, you've probably not heard of Belgacom, but you've probably heard of a virus called Regin, R-E-G-I-N, which was another very sophisticated piece of malware that was designed to act as a watering hole in which various employees of Belgacom, which was the telecommunications provider in Belgium, and think about where Belgium exists in the European Union, sort of in the center of everything. So this, the Belgacom hack was through a rat which was allowed to collect information and communications that were going on for a period of 2 to 3 years. Again, I mentioned time periods here because dwell time is another critically important problem that we have in critical infrastructure. The German steel mill attack you may have heard about as well too. This was basically the steel mill blew up as a result of attackers moving from the IT networks, which they were able to get into, and then move laterally into the OT networks. The big difference here was no segmentation, no DMZ zones, nothing in the middle, which would have allowed this attack to have been stopped. Also, no 24/7 monitoring, and bad things happen. Last, you've heard of Ukraine 1 and Ukraine 2. You could also call them Ukraine 2015 and 2016. These were attacks which many attribute to Russia. These were allegedly done through the use of spear phishing emails, which targeted people inside the Ukrainian power plant facilities. By using the spear phishing, they were allowed to harvest credentials, and by continuing the spear phishing campaign, they were also acquired the VPN credentials of various employees, which they then used to affect the transmission grid. So this is sort of another variant of how malware is spread, not just in the IT sector, but how it can be spread and used between IT and OT as well too. SWIFT you've heard about. It's probably a good idea to use multi-factor authentication whenever you're signing onto your network. Sony Pictures, another one which we are well familiar with. And we see again sort of the great attacks which we've heard about this summer of 2017. We don't know much about them. The public has not been given a lot of information about types of attacks which have happened on the grid. We know they exist. We know they've happened. We have over the years a variety of different methods. Again, where I started my presentation, I'm unburdened by the past, but we must consider the past to understand what we can do better in the future. So we've come up with a hodgepodge of methods which we use and consider to be best practices in the critical infrastructure community. And some of them we know and we hear about all the time, like secure communications, VPN networks, that allow secured communications into critical infrastructure. We've heard earlier today in one of the presentations about vulnerability assessments. What does that mean? We heard as Saudi Aramco's saving grace was, we know that the segmentation between IT and OT networks is extremely important through the use of firewalls, through the use of one-way waterfall communication designs in which communication can only exit the OT network and cannot enter the OT network. We know all about privileged access management and identity and access management. We know about patching problems. We certainly know about employee training and awareness, and we know about the importance of cyber threat intelligence. What we also know about this hodgepodge of patchwork methods to secure critical infrastructure, we know it's a hodgepodge. We know it's not automated. We know it's not trained. We know it's not planned. And we know that from experience, not everybody practices all 8 different methods of protecting critical infrastructure, which is again the problem here in the United States, especially when we have in most critical infrastructure sectors, we do not have mandatory guidelines. We do not have any, unless you're in the nuclear sector, we do not have any mandatory guidelines which require you to use one method over a different method. And I stop here on the hodgepodge of methods because it really is sort of the genesis of what we are seeing today in critical infrastructure, and we're seeing rolled out. we see two things that are happening today, and I think we will see more of them in the months and the years ahead of us. We are able today, through the use of big data and big data analytics, to really truly understand, the characteristics of what malware looks like, what it is, how it behaves, its different pieces and its different components. And if you read the studies, you understand that malware is only sometimes slightly different from the previous variant that existed. So by looking through a big data analytical ability, we're able to understand its characteristics. And then through another big data tool called machine learning, we're able to take, as you can see on the left side of the graph, we're able to take a bunch of different file samples, either goodware or malware, which are spread across the grid in various degrees and various fashions. And by categorizing the file structure and by categorizing what it is, we're able to create some common sense, meaning the straight line, which separates the difference between what malware is from goodware is. And that is the whole concept of machine learning, is using an algorithm which will allow you to understand better what's good, what's bad, what should be accepted, what should be blocked. Again, characteristics. And I think these are all important. I'm not going to get hung up on them, but there is malware that has characteristics which we know. Is the malware packed and needs to be unpacked? Does the malware send spam? How does it react as to employees, customers, suppliers? Does it read and steal private information? Is it a remote access tool? Will it encrypt data like ransomware? Will it make network connections like command and control? And finally, when you reverse engineer the code, what does it look like? If we know what it looks like, we know how it behaves, we can take new pieces of files and new malware and new files that come into a network, and by categorizing them and identifying them, we know what's good and we know what's bad. Again, what is machine learning? Computer algorithms that learn from and make predictions regarding data. Machine learning, again, is able to make sense of hundreds of billions of pieces of information and files and file characteristics, and is able to make sense of them. Why do we need machine learning, and why is it so important, and why do we need to implement it? Very, very simply put, the exponential increase in internet traffic today, the merger of IT and OT networks. No, we never had these problems of malware invading critical infrastructure up until 10 or 15 years ago, when somebody decided it was a great idea to make power plants internet connected and internet enabled, so you didn't have to have 14 workers on site. You could have 2, and you can have other people sitting in another country viewing the power plants. We've created our own problems here, gang, and we need to fix them by using different methods. Again, I would submit to you it's not the hodgepodge approach, because the hodgepodge is not going to be all enacted and enabled, and the hodgepodge, is simply put, is not going to catch everything. So again, this is the concept of machine learning. And let me just talk about 2 different pieces of machine learning if you're not familiar with it. Who knows what unsupervised machine learning is? What's unsupervised?
You don't give any parameters based on what's right and what's wrong.
Just based upon behavior, just based upon what happens, as opposed to what it is or what it is not. That's unsupervised machine learning. Supervised machine learning, well, obviously, is a different approach. Call it the IBM Watson approach, where you have machine learning coupled with experts and people that are watching on characterizations to figure out and to confirm or deny is something good or is something bad. So those are the two concepts of machine learning. How does machine learning work? Machine learning, and this is maybe a tough chart to understand, but it starts with training data. And training data, for instance, for a machine learning platform could either be the user behavior analytics of what is going on at a particular endpoint or at a particular sensor in order to understand what it is, or training data could be malware. And you may or may not know there are extensive repositories around the United States in which security companies can, in fact, take training data or use training data from in order to train their own algorithms and their own predictive models and better understand what data is coming into their networks or not. So training data is used, which is again characterized, as you remember from the chart 2 or 3 slides previous. It is then fed into an algorithm which allows you to, again, shorthand, make sense of the data, what's good and what's bad. And then the algorithm allows you then to create a predictive model. And what is a predictive model? A predictive model allows you to then look at new files that are coming into your network, and then through using the predictive model, you can then determine whether or not the data, the file is a good file or it's a bad file. This is how again machine learning works. Again, whether it's unsupervised or supervised, you're characterizing the file, you're characterizing the structure, you're characterizing what it looks like, you're creating your algorithm, and then you're using the algorithm as a way to ingest new files, new intelligence, new data into your network, and then spitting it out on the other side as either good or spitting it out as either bad. Right off the bat, any computer scientist or data analytics person will tell you algorithms need to be fine-tuned and modeled and need to be looked at individually. You can't go to I was going to say Toys R Us, which filed for bankruptcy. I guess everything has filed for bankruptcy recently, but you can't go into one particular automobile company, General Motors, look at that algorithm, and then go into McDonnell Douglas or Boeing, which makes aircrafts, and look at that algorithm. Those algorithms will not behave the same way. Different manufacturing, different components, different parts, different vendors, different suppliers. So these are the step one and step 2 is creating your predictive model through your data, and then 2, using the predictive model in order to assess whether or not a file is good or a file is bad. Now, you've probably all read and probably all understand what is deep learning, called deep learning a subset of machine learning. Deep learning is a neural network with many layers, including hidden layers of non-linear processing units. Each layer uses the output from the previous layer. And this is a very simplified chart of what a neural network could look like. Here with only 9 hidden layers, you can have an infinite amount of hidden layers and an infinite amount of outputs. When you look at sort of the big deep learning platforms, you can see instead of 9, you can have 90 different hidden layers of neural networks that will allow you to crunch the data. And again, the theory behind all this is through each of the neural networks, through each of the different layers, you're continuing to refine and refine and refine your analysis. How are we able to do this today? How are we able to create these neural networks? We're able to do it through the use of the cloud. And simply put, we couldn't do this years ago, and now through organizations like Amazon, we have the ability to have sort of an infinite capacity of high performance cloud computing. It's inexpensive, and many of the different security providers, as you see and understand and think about this concept, have access and use the cloud. Again, what do you need in cybersecurity? What do you need for incident response? You need to figure out what the hell is going on in your network, and you need to know it as soon as possible. By using deep learning, by using a cloud environment, by using high performance computing horsepower, you're able to figure out with a very high degree of accuracy and at network speed whether or not a file is good or whether or not a file is bad. And again, when you think about what's going on in the ecosystem and the environment today, what we're finding is that there's just no way you can survive a breach where somebody's been on your network for 3 or 6 months and you didn't know it and you didn't know what was going on. Giving you further impetus to enact these systems into your networks. Both machine learning and deep learning give you 24/7 monitoring, give you always on, and give you the ability to deal with, as some of our clients have, up to 1 million alerts a day, and have, bring the 1 million alerts a day down to 100 alerts a day by using the horsepower and the infinite ability to crunch data. What we would like to see and what we hope to see in the United States in the next few years is the ability to do what some private companies are doing today, use the cloud in a critical infrastructure environment in order to capture the different types of data. So as you can see on the far left-hand side, we're taking data from PLC controllers, we're taking data from endpoints, we're taking data from sensors, and then we're taking internet-related traffic. We are then through a network tap, call it bouncing this data to the cloud in order that it goes through a deep learning type environment. Call it a scrubber, like you would see in a DDoS environment that you're scrubbing DNS traffic. Call it a scrubber, where you're sending data into the cloud, and then you are then determining traffic, whether it's good or bad. Good traffic goes through to the plant. Bad traffic is flagged and alerted, goes to the SOC, and is blocked at the SOC. So we've seen this sort of environment already in place, and again, some private networks. GE, General Electric, has something called the GHOST system, GHOST system, which will allow you to do exactly what I've demonstrated up on the screen. GE uses its own training data, obviously, from its own turbines, its own sensors, its own power plants, and then is able to look at the network traffic and then determine whether or not it's good traffic or bad traffic. This will, sure.
Obviously, the false positive is going to generate alert. Is there any way of tracking false negatives?
No, not that I know of. Okay. Not that I know of. I mean, conceptually speaking, that shouldn't exist. So long as you're using a relevant pool of training data in order to determine, what's good traffic and what's bad traffic. I think the other part that we're learning more frequently today is that though the private sector would like to get rid of people like you guys to not look at the networks and not sit in a SOC, I think we are learning today that having trained analytics people that are sitting in your SOCs and your security defense centers are important to judge the difference between what is a false positive and is a false negative. And by using that sort of data, we can create a better set of training data which will allow your algorithm and your predictive models to come out with a better result, if that answer makes sense to you. So again, looking at sort of a network deployed system here, we're exploding the previous chart into a little bit deeper of chart. You remember our previous model where we took everything from the left-hand side and we were ingesting that data and bouncing it to the cloud. In our model here today, we're showing you what happens in the cloud, and what we're really talking about is both a static analysis and a dynamic analysis that happen using, in essence, a sandbox type of a tool to allow you to understand and in fact detonate a file that may be bad. So the box on the right again gives you some clue of what is happening up in the cloud. It's not just magic and hocus pocus. It's a sandbox tool which allows you to analyze what's going on. And then as you're analyzing that information, you're then sending it down to the big box on the bottom where you're sending it into the neural network for analysis versus the predictive model. We are using these mechanisms today. Everything exists. This is not new. I've sat on panels continuously, probably every month for the last 4 years, and people talk about machine learning and deep learning in the, oh, it's brand new technology, oh, we don't know how it works, we don't know if it works. That's a load of hocus pocus. These models and these solutions do work. We have the ability, as we talked about, through using the high performance computing in the cloud, we have the ability to send this data through neural networks. We have the ability through a network TAP or threat analytics platform to examine and extract all files entering the network from critical infrastructure. Now you might say, what is this all files, and is this what happens with legacy files, and what happens if you put these solutions in after the fact? We heard from Ron Ross about security by design, but you can only do that if you're designing it in the first instance. So what we can do today is use a data historian, which collects every single bit of traffic that you have coming into your network, and we can send the data from the data historian up to the cloud and scrub that data as well too. So we have come up with solutions which allow you to both examine current traffic as well as historical traffic, because if you can't examine historical traffic, something can be sitting on your network system for 3 or 6 months and you'd never know about it. Again and again, going back to the different examples which we've given with Ukraine 1 and Ukraine 2, all that malware sat on the systems for months, up to 6 months at a time. So we have the ability to have an analytical interface. I would call it a SIM, but I don't like SIMs because I don't like the archaic way a SIM is thought of in today's environment. If you were upstairs and you saw the dark trace appliances, you saw that this is more like what your son or daughter would play on the Xbox. These are real platforms which allow you to understand what your endpoints are, what's going on in your endpoint, what sort of data you have, so you can see how it's executing and then block it if you can. Finally, I haven't been in any presentation today which talks about the need for threat intelligence feeds into different defensive environments. I'm a big believer and supporter of cybersecurity threat sharing and sharing it within industry data. And what I think you will see happening in the next 3 to 6 to 12 months is you will see these industrial deep learning platforms like GE is starting with, and that others more commercially will pick up. You will start seeing people pulling in to their deep learning platforms, cyber threat intelligence, sharing information for context, for a deeper way or method or mode of understanding what's going on within the networks. Because it is true that for every known vulnerability, like Equifax, which was out there for 6 months and it wasn't patched, you'll have a zero-day exploit as well too. And I think we have to understand and be cognizant of what's in our environment and what's not, and the fact what's in our environment could be something that's completely new and something that is completely different, but we need to understand it. I urge you all to think about the threat intelligence sharing. If you're not involved in the ISACs, that's a tremendous amount of data. And I can tell you from other discussions, the government is trying to figure out how to share data more quickly, fastly, efficiently, in order to get that intelligence information down to the private sector at its earliest convenience. I do think, it's important to conclude here today on a positive note. All this stuff exists. All this stuff can be done. All this stuff can be done today, whether you're talking a machine learning platform, supervised, unsupervised. You're talking deep learning platforms like, for instance, Deep Instinct or Cyber 2020 or some of the other platforms. All this stuff exists. It exists today. It can be done today. We shouldn't be sitting back thinking that we can defend our networks like we used to 5 and 10 and 15 years ago. It's simply not the truth. It's simply not the case. So I'd like to stop here now, and does anybody have any questions? Has anybody been thinking about these systems in your organizations? Have you enacted them? Tell me what's going on in your environments.
Does FERC and NERC provide any guidance into your discussion of learning?
NERC? Well, NERC is the only one which provides not just guidance, but regulatory. Yes. As far as non-nuclear environments, we see more guidance than regulation. And I posit whether or not, given the events of the last couple of weeks, whether or not we will see machine learning and deep learning not just become nice to have, not just becoming guidance, but becoming must-have. At least in different environments here in New York City, machine learning is thought to be a must-have. Whether or not we can then transform this into the fuller private sector, that's really the case, and that's really the big play of the next 6, 12, 18 months, is whether or not we make something like the cybersecurity framework mandatory for critical infrastructure. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I heard you mention, these things can be done. The idea of the cost for GE, for a company on the scale. We have large financial services firms here in New York, right? And
Right.
Obviously, there's different initiatives going on in each of those firms. Question being, a lot of these firms don't want to share information into a cloud even for that additional analytics. Right?
Well,
because
our clients use 2 providers in this area. They use Darktrace and they use FireEye. Darktrace being a unsupervised environment, and FireEye being Helix, meaning sort of a machine learning, automation, and orchestration platform. I can tell you today, for less than $500,000, you can put these systems into your companies, have them up and running within days. Now, again, that's nothing to sneeze at, but you can do that on a managed services basis as well too, and the cost then jumps down exponentially. And we recommend managed services to many, many different clients that just can't, they have the money, but they just can't hire enough people in order to staff their operation centers.
You mentioned a hodgepodge solution in the prior slides, including a network segmentation. I know I hear that quite a bit. Do you see that as value in addition to this?
There's no silver bullet, and certainly machine learning nor deep learning is not a silver bullet. It's almost a panacea in some sense for not doing other things that you could have been doing in the first place, but decided you didn't want to do it or you couldn't catch up with the hodgepodge. I do believe in a holistic approach, like network segmentation, virtualization, micro-virtualization, all are important parts, and you can see the Saudi Aramco as an example of what segmentation could mean between having a really bad day and a really ugly day if your oil wells start blowing up, because you have infected your OT networks as well too, which is the German steel mill.
Yeah, I say that simply because, I'm literally doing that for our organization now, one portion of it. I deem it as of value. It's just, it's challenging. The challenge is still fresh in my mind as of yesterday.
It is challenging, but what's your alternative? That's the problem we face today. I don't see many good alternatives to either have the, quote, hodgepodge, which you may or may not do all the items with, versus, I hate to say Skynet sitting behind you watching over your networks. And some might say Skynet's a better example.
Well, the critical infrastructure, one of the most critical things is public safety, health and safety, and environmental issues. So any of the incidents that you have come across where cybersecurity breach was responsible to result into some of those?
The only one that's public is the Westchester Dam Iranian hack that we know of, but that didn't amount to much of anything because everything was broken in the first place, and therefore no water or no dam or no well was let out. But this is equally applicable. I get my better example to you is healthcare. And I think where we're seeing a lot of play today in machine learning and deep learning is in the healthcare sectors, which have too many endpoints, too many people, too many users, too many interns, too many residents. Yeah, and a zillion devices, including heart monitors, IV pumps, and the like that need to be monitored, and dialysis pumps. And the only way you can do it is through a deep learning or machine learning type environment to monitor everything.
We introduced machine learning into play for the purpose of identifying good traffic versus bad traffic. Well, what's the point of machine learning if your network's already compromised and you don't even know it? And
Right.
Machine learning picking up and assuming that's normal traffic behavior when it's not.
Right, and that's the play today with data historians, is that you just can't install, for instance, a Darktrace platform onto your system without knowing what else is going on and what else you have already.
Unfortunately, people don't know and they assume that the network is normal.
And it's a big problem. It's a big fallacy. But I can tell you, our clients are going the data historian route because they understand you could be sitting with an Equifax problem on your hands for 6 months and not really understanding what was going on. So I think very important for you to consider, if you're considering these approaches, considering the data historian as a way to capture every single piece of network traffic that you ever had, capturing it in one place, and then sending it to the cloud to be scrubbed as well too.
So Paul, thank you so much. I appreciate.
Thank you very much. information is there. And I thank you for listening to the lawyer today, probably the only lawyer that you'll listen to today.
So I heard, if I didn't ask that one.
Should I?